Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the November 19th meeting of the Desert Water Agency Board of Directors. I'll call this meeting to order. Just some housekeeping items for those who are participating virtually. If you wouldn't mind muting your microphones until you are ready to speak during public comment or otherwise. And for those of us that are in the room, to also do the same to prevent distractions during the meeting. And members of the public, of course, can participate either in person in the room here or virtually through the information that's provided on the posted agenda. With that, we'll move to item number 2, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm going to ask Director Gracia to lead us today.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now we'll move to a roll call. And actually, I'm a little bit, I guess I overlooked something. We are supposed to do roll call in the following order: Director Gracia, Director Bloomer, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega, and votes will be taken in roll call order. And with that, Ms. Baca, would you please take the roll call?
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director Bloomer,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna's absence is noted, and Vice President Bowman
Here.
and President Ortega.
Present. Thank you. Item 4 would be public comments on items not on today's agenda. These would be items that are relevant to the business of the Desert Water Agency, but not necessarily on today's agenda. Members of the public may speak we ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and remind the public that as provided in the Brown Act, the board is prohibited from acting on items that are not listed on the agenda today. So with that, Ms. Baca, have we received any public comments?
No comments have been received.
Okay. Are there members of the public that would like to speak at this point? You can either raise your hand virtually or you can come to the podium. Seeing none, we'll move to item 5, which would be for items that are on today's agenda. If there are any members of the public who would like to speak on an item related to today's agenda, please come forward or raise your hand virtually. I see one hand, a Graham Bradner. No. Oh, okay. That's something else. All right. Thank you. So it looks like we have no public comment at this time. We can move to the consent calendar. That's item number 6. Items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion of the board without discussion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a board member requests a specific item to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. And we have 3 items on today's consent calendar. Are any of my fellow directors interested in pulling one of those items for further discussion? It doesn't seem so. So I would look for a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented.
I move item 6 as presented.
Thank you. I'd look for a second.
I'll second.
All right. So we have a first from Director Gracia, second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna's absence is noted, Vice President Bowman
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Our next items are action items, starting with 7A. 7A is a request adoption of resolution number 1340 as a responsible agency under CEQA, confirming the adequacy of the EIR for the proposed Delta Conveyance project, making certain findings under CEQA, adopting the statement of overriding considerations for the EIR, and authorizing additional funds for the next phase of pre-construction work for the Delta Conveyance project in an amount of up to $4,560,000. That's a lot. So let's start with Mr. Johnson.
Thank you,
President Ortega, and members of the board. Yes, it's a very large title, but ultimately we're here today to provide the board some updates regarding the Delta Conveyance Project, or DCP, and to ask the board to adopt Resolution 1340 that will allow the agency to satisfy some administrative actions for CEQA, but it'll also authorize additional funding for the next phase of pre-construction work for the DCP in that amount of $4.56 million. So this morning, what I'd like to do is there's two presentations that we have for the board. And the first will be, I would like to have Carrie Buckman and Graham Bradner provide their presentation, and they are attending via Zoom. And they'll provide an overview of the importance of the project and also a summary of the cost estimates and benefit cost analysis of the project. Carrie is the environmental project manager for DWR, and Graham is the executive director for the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority, or DCA. And I just would like to thank Carrie and Graham for attending the meeting this morning. They have a vast knowledge of the project, and it's much appreciated that you're here to provide the board some important information. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Carrie and Graham.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you so much for having us this morning. We're really happy to be here virtually and be able to talk to you more about the project. Is it okay if I share my screen with the slides? Is that the best way to do this? I'll give it a shot. Okay, hopefully you guys can see the screen with the slides.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to start a little bit with a discussion about why we're doing this project, why we as DWR think this is so important. Then I'll hand this over to Graham to talk about the cost estimate that has been done by the DCA. And then just to check in, are the slides still sharing correctly? I'm sorry about this. Technical difficulties.
Yeah, right
We're
now
still
it's
on
on
the
the
cover
title
slide.
page.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And then I'll talk about the benefit cost analysis at the end. So just starting with why we think this project is so important. You know, as we look forward to the future of the State Water Project, we're really recognizing that climate change that we've been sort of thinking about and planning about and preparing for is now happening. You know, we're seeing a lot of the trends that we were predicting to happen in the future, and they've started to really show themselves in the past few years. So looking forward to climate modeling, there is a pretty broad range of where the precipitation could end up. We think that there could be a decrease of annual projected runoff or an increase of up to 47%. So while the amount of runoff might be variable, there are a lot of trends that are consistent that we know we need to prepare for. And those consistent trends include that we know that we're going to have more precipitation falling as rain instead of snow. We also are expecting more extreme drought and flood cycles. And this is one where I think we've seen this over the past few years with 2 years of very, very dry conditions followed by an extremely wet year. And we also are expecting what we call flashy storm events, which are pockets of really intense precipitation scattered within otherwise dry years. And I think it's October of 2021, if people remember, there was this huge storm in Sacramento. We had like over 5 inches of rain in 24 hours. And then we had this other very big storm event between Christmas and New Year's of that year. So that was a critically dry year. So there was very little precipitation the rest of the year, but there were these two very large storm events. And if we had been able to capture water during those storm events, we would have been in a better situation in those very critically dry years. So as we look at these changing precipitation patterns and the weather patterns, we know that our existing water system for the State Water Project is not equipped to handle them.
Hey, Carrie,
So-
before you keep going, I'm still looking at the cover slide. Have you been advancing?
Okay, I am advancing. Let's see.
Does it look the same to you, Desert Water Agency? It
Okay,
must-
now we are on slide 3, which is
Thank you.
historic
I think
water
I have,
management.
apparently I have to advance it in 2 places, so I'll do that. Sorry about that.
Okay, thanks, Gary.
Okay, so this is where I'm sort of looking at the historic patterns and how things are changing as we move forward. So right now, we do really rely on the snowpack as another means of storage. And what we're looking at in the future is that that's going to change. So currently in the winter, we have stream flow coming from rainfall in the valley, and then the snowpack is saved in the mountains until spring. But moving forward, we're going to have far less of that. So more flashy, high flow events during the winter, less runoff in the spring. And so that winter runoff, we really need to be able to capture, and we're pretty limited with our ability to capture it right now. We usually can't capture it in storage because we run up against flood control limitations. And in the Delta, there are water quality and flow and biological regulations that limit our capture in the South Delta. So what we're looking for is a way to try to add to our ability to capture that flow. And at the same time, help prepare for earthquakes and other things that may threaten our facilities in the Delta. So that's really the fundamental reason that we're considering this project. Uh, Last year is a really good year, or a really good example of why this project would have been so valuable. So I think people probably followed last year that there was an issue with steelhead congregating near the South Delta pumps for the State Water Project. And the steelhead congregating in the South Delta was unusual. When you look historically, steelhead have really not caused a limitation on diversions for the State Water Project. Usually there are other regulations that may at times, but this was a much longer and different kind of regulation. If we had had the flexibility to move those diversions to the north, the proposed North Delta facilities that are part of the Delta Conveyance Project, we did not have steelhead congregated in the North Delta, so we would have been able to divert water during pretty wet conditions where we were limited this last year. So if we had had the Delta Conveyance Project in place this last year, we would have been able to capture about 941,000 acre feet of water, which is enough water for over 9.8 million people for 1 year and nearly 3.3 million households per year. It would have really tremendously helped us during this year, which was above normal, but yet we really didn't capture as much as we would have liked,
Hey,
led to a
Carrie, sorry,
40%.
the slides still aren't advancing. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay. 9.8 million people for a year, or nearly 3.3 million households for a year. So moving on to what's coming next on the planning side, we hit a really major milestone at the end of 2023 by finalizing our environmental impact report and issuing a notice of determination. With that notice of determination, we did decide on an alternative to move forward, and Graham is going to talk more about what that project looks like. Next steps, we are working on other permit processes. So we're working on our Endangered Species Act and California Endangered Species Act processes, both of which are expected to wrap up key deliverables this year. We are also working on our water rights process to change the point of diversion for our water rights. We are not looking to expand our existing State Water Project water right, but rather add the 2 points of diversion in the North Delta that are part of this project. And then following that, we will be working to demonstrate consistency with the Delta plan. So with that, I will hand this over to Graham.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. Good morning. Happy to be here virtually. I'll let you. Thanks, Carrie. So first, let's talk a minute about the project itself. The Bethany Reservoir alignment is the alternative that was evaluated through the EIR and selected, as Carrie just mentioned. So it is the Delta Conveyance Project. It's a 6,000 cubic foot per second project. Overall, I'd characterize the level of design at about 10% in aggregate. So we've made a lot of progress on thinking through the various components of the project, and that's really led into a really comprehensive update to the cost estimate. But just to start with an overview, the blue dots at the top of the map, those are the intake locations along the main stem of the Sacramento River. So they're in the North Delta. And then there's a conveyance tunnel, 45 miles of 36-foot internal diameter tunnel, constructed with 11 shafts. That conveyance tunnel is necessary to move the water, that 6,000 cubic foot per second max diversion from those intakes in the north down to the existing state water project infrastructure in the south. So very at the far southern end of the map there, you see Clifton Court Forebay. That's part of the existing state water project system. And so this new pumping plant that would be constructed as part of the alternative would lift the water out of the tunnel, but deliver it also up the hillside directly into Bethany Reservoir through a new discharge structure dedicated to these northern intakes. The work includes also the necessary aspects of land acquisition, power supply, and consumption during construction. Environmental mitigation identified in the EIR is also included in the cost estimate. Community benefits program, which I'll highlight, as well as a settlement agreement with Contra Costa Water District to plumb some of their facilities into the system for future use. We do have within the estimate various ways to account for uncertainty. We've got both direct contingency as well as what we call risk treatment costs or risk mitigation costs, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here in a few slides. Next slide, please. So our estimate methodology, this was a very detailed estimate for the Bethany Reservoir alternative. This approach, sort of a bottoms up or deterministic unit cost approach, means that we built our way up to the estimate as opposed to a top down approach, which would actually be more typical at this early stage of most projects. But given the complexity and the magnitude of the project, we felt like it was really worth the effort now that we have a selected alternative to really refine this estimate in a way and true up our understanding of the approach and make sure that we've got a really comprehensive estimate that we can move forward with. So we had to think about all the activities that would be performed, the duration and material requirements, labor requirements for those activities, and build our way up to that estimate. It's in 2023 real prices. So those are, the estimate was updated from 2020 to now a 2023 dollar basis. But it's also important to recognize these are undiscounted dollars. So this means they're not accounting for the time value of money. So it does not account for escalation into the future, nor does it account for the economic impacts and value of that water into the future. That's all addressed in the economic feasibility analysis, the benefit cost analysis that Carrie's going to describe here in just a little bit. This won't be the last cost estimate, but this is an update principally to communicate the cost of the selected project and also feed the economic feasibility analysis. Our expectations would be at a minimum, we'll update this estimate again once the permit processes are completed so that we can really tee up this project for implementation consideration at all the agencies. We have multiple reconciliations within the estimate process, both internally with different teams working independently on similar estimate approaches and then reconciling those different estimates, but also a very high level comparison that we can reflect back on to that 2020 cost assessment. This updated estimate would classify as a class 4 estimate, although there are some class 5 aspects still remaining within the estimate, mostly around subsurface conditions along the tunnel alignment. We still have some pretty significant gaps there. So that for that reason, pieces of the project, especially the tunnel, would still classify as a class 5 estimate. But we do have a very detailed effort and we have confirmed sufficient information to develop this concept design and estimate. Last assumption on the estimate methodology is it does assume design, bid, build, procurement. So we do get a lot of questions about this from the industry, thinking about the potential advantages of alternative project delivery like design build, progressive design build, or CMAR. But at this point, we're assuming conservatively design, bid, build, which creates the longest timeline, longest schedule, and that in turn is translated into the economic analysis in a more conservative way. Next slide, please. So we did need to develop not only the costs of all the various features, but then think about a schedule associated with constructing the project. This really helps to address one of the key issues from an economic study perspective, which is that the costs are all front loaded to build the project. And then once it's operational, at that point, the benefits start accruing for 100+ years beyond. This is a project designed to operate for 100 years, but you got to get through the construction phase of the project before you can start to reap those benefits. So we developed a high-level schedule here. There's a much more detailed schedule behind it, and this helps to create an expenditure curve that we were able to feed into the economic feasibility analysis. In general, the schedule has those major permit activities that Carrie was talking about wrapping up around the end of 2026. In parallel to that, we're working on a number of key early design activities. So that's a continued collection of geotechnical information as well as survey and other important sort of ground characterization activities. We've got a lot of work on the right-of-way side of things to not only obtain the temporary entry permits we need now to get in and do some of these studies, but to also plan the future right-of-way activities associated with permanent land acquisition that would come after completion of those major permits. We're already working with the power providers with a lot of help from DWR on this so that we've got good agency-to-agency communications going on there. We would anticipate some of the major design procurements coming pretty close to the end of the permit phase. That would start really with the roads and early work. So making sure we've got all of our access and logistics laid out. So those would be some of the early design contracts. According to the critical path, we would want to procure some of our tunnel contract designs pretty early to get those moving. But in reality, a lot of that early activity on the tunnel side is again, just kind of getting ready for the actual tunnel excavation process. It's confirming the site access, constructing the shafts, the pads that the shafts are built from. There's a lot of preparatory work that happens, building up to the initiation of tunnel excavation. So down on the bottom, construction activities, you've got about 3.5 years. You can see sort of a lag there, but where the power and the roads and tunnels start, and then some of the later features, pumping plant, intakes, aqueducts. So that gap is about 3.5 years of really early work, logistics, laying the groundwork for the really important push, which is the initiation of tunnel excavation in 2033. So we've got early activity starting in 29, excavation of tunnels in 33. Peak of construction is around 2035. All 4 tunnel reaches are under construction, as well as all the other major aspects of the program simultaneously under construction. Construction would complete around 2042, and then 2 years of system startup and shakedown to make sure that everything is fully commissioned, handing the system over to DWR for operation by the end of 44. Next slide, please. So that updated cost estimate I mentioned, you can just look at the table. First of all, on the right-hand side, totals to the bottom, $20.12 billion. So this is obviously a significant project. And looking at the top, you can see kind of how the costs break down between the various facilities. Most of it is in the tunnel and shaft construction. About half of the construction cost is associated with excavating and constructing the tunnel. We've included a 30% contingency within the construction estimate. Additionally, buried within those construction costs prior to application of contingency is where we've applied almost $500 million of risk treatment costs. So that's acknowledging potential risks, thinking about the activities we might take on the design or construction side to manage those risks, and then accounting for those activities in the estimate directly. In the lower portion of the estimate, so it's about 75% construction costs, 25% what we call other program costs. And so that includes all of the planning, design, and CM soft costs, as well as the land acquisition. I mentioned mitigation, close to $1 billion in environmental mitigation identified through the EIR and accounted for in the cost estimate. I mentioned also the community benefits program, $200 million set aside to benefit local communities where this very large construction effort would take place. So this is all accounted for, and we view this as a very comprehensive estimate. Again, even though we're still pretty early in the process. Next slide, please. So one of the high-level reconciliations or comparisons we can look at to sort of validate our confidence here. We've got inside the gold box, that first column of numbers, the updated 2023 dollar basis estimate. That's $20.12 billion. Next to it, the second column of large numbers is our 2020 cost assessment. So this was a bit of a different project, but we've done what we could to create more of an apples to apples comparison here. But that estimate back in 2020 was $15.9 billion. And then we took that 15.9 and escalated it up to $2023 using the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's construction cost trend data. And we end up at 20.17 billion. So comparing the 20.12, 20.17, these are estimates prepared in very different ways, really more of the traditional top-down would be kind of how I would characterize that 2020 work. But the fact that we're so close together really indicates to me that, you know, if you sort of pull out the effects of inflation, we're still managing to keep costs pretty flat here. They're just moving around between a higher contingency in 2020. We've lowered that now. We've got better definition of the project. We've sharpened our pencil on labor costs and a number of other key factors. So although some have gone up, others have gone down, it's a really good demonstration of how effective, you know, good quality cost estimating can help you work your way through the process. Next slide, please. Another big focus for us in updating that estimate was to also think about potential innovations to the design. We have a intentionally conservative concept that's evaluated in the EIR. That's to make sure that we're creating a sort of an umbrella of potential impacts associated with the project. And now we're working to refine within that umbrella, looking for opportunities to reduce impacts, reduce costs, improve constructability. This is a real indication of how the project could evolve through future value engineering and how powerful a tool value engineering is in terms of managing costs on a large program like this. The estimate really helps us understand where the major costs are allocated, and then allows us to further dig into that and see what we can do to better manage or reduce uncertainty with some of those key features. So right now we're looking at 19 innovations. We're actually continuing to look and have more on the table. But back when we prepared the estimate, we wanted to think through and talk about innovations that we felt were highly credible, even at this early stage. These are things that we don't think we'll be walking back in the future. These look like they have a real strong potential to improve the project configuration. So we've sort of honed in on these 19 innovations. But to be clear, they don't represent changes to the project description. That's for DWR to consider as part of the permit process as they continue working their way through that. Next slide, please. So this is a really good example of the innovations work on this is the pumping plant, the new pumping plant that would be constructed down at the south end of the Delta. On the left-hand side, you've got the current design. That's the design that was evaluated in the EIR. Most of this facility is below ground, so you've got the surface, you know, the ground surface with the gantry cranes and the shade structures. Everything else is below ground, so this is a very deep subterranean structure. It's built of rectangular reinforced diaphragm walls. There's the two pump bays on either side of it that straddle the wet well inlet conduit. That's the connection from the termination of the tunnel into the pumping plant. And then you've got straddling at the pump bays with all of the pumps housed on either side of that.
Excuse me, Graham, but your voice suddenly went very quiet.
It did.
Yeah, we can hardly hear you.
That's weird. Let me look at my audio settings.
Now you're back.
I'm back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the heads up. I'll try and speak up a little bit too, but it looks like my mic is all the way up in Zoom. So let me know if I need to do something again, okay? So then on the right-hand side is the innovation design, and it does a couple of key things. First, it replaces the...
I'm sorry, Graham, it's happening again. You were really loud and normal for us, and then you just disappeared as you started talking again.
Weird. Yeah, I can see the mic icon isn't lighting up very much. Let me try getting closer. Does that work? Yeah. All right, my face will just be really big on your screen, I'm afraid, but okay.
You look good.
And I'm gonna yell at the computer. So we've got on the right-hand side the interior box wet well being replaced with a tunnel connection. So that's likely a sequentially excavated tunnel connection instead of all that deep excavation and reinforced box structure. And then on the right, and then straddling that new connection, that pump connection or tunnel connection to the pump bays, you've got a set of interlocking shafts instead of a deep diaphragm wall box structure. This is a set of interlocking shafts that's much more structurally sound, much more efficient to construct. It's done all over the world. This is a technology that we do think is applicable here, and think this really has strong merit Just looking at the reductions associated with this innovations, our secondary estimate considered just the quantities. So 274,000 cubic yards of reduced soil excavation, 84,000 cubic yards of reduced concrete associated with many fewer walls and cross bracing, 10,400 tons reduced of rebar. So some significant material cost savings. It also shortens the construction schedule for the pumping plant by almost 1,000 days, which has a huge benefit in terms of inflation impacts, as well as creating float within the overall construction schedule. Just racking up those direct construction cost savings at the top, those material savings, it's close to $140 million of savings on this project. All of this while not changing really the above ground configuration at all and working within the umbrella of impacts identified by the EIR. Next slide, please. So I think this is close to my last slide. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. So we took those 19 innovations, racked up the direct construction cost benefits, and then applied a proportion of the risk treatment cost, then the contingency, and then the labor percents and other direct application of other costs, as you can see down in the estimate. So in comparing the cost savings, potential cost savings associated with those 19 innovations, we got a fully loaded cost on the bottom right-hand side of the table. So it's down to 18.9 billion, which is a 6% reduction compared to the new estimate, or $1.25 billion saved. So this is a really significant savings, and really delivers on what we hope in terms of being able to manage costs into the future. And this is something that we are continuing to work on in detail, looking at potential risk or schedule savings and how those might further help manage cost, as well as the benefits of potential collaborative delivery in terms of how we could save in terms of risk and schedule and other factors. So just an indication of really the key work that we're doing now, trying to contemplate how we might manage costs. So I think that's it for my slides, and it should go back to Carrie.
It is. Thanks, Graham. So I'm going to provide an overview of the benefit cost analysis that we completed. We hired the Berkeley Research Group to do this work. They were led by Dr. David Sunding. He's a professor emeritus at UC Berkeley, and they applied pretty standard water economic processes to look at the benefits and the costs of this project. So just as a sort of reminder, the State Water Project service area includes 27 million people, which adds up to a GDP of $2.3 trillion. A study of the State Water Project economy looked at it, and I know we talk a lot about if California was its own nation, it would be the 5th largest nation in the world. If the State Water Project service area was its own nation, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world. So all this to say, the State Water Project is an incredibly important resource as part of the economy of California. The current water supply from our modeling averages out to be 2.56 million acre feet per year to both urban and agricultural customers. And we know, as we talked earlier, that we are facing climate change and sea level rise that will reduce the effectiveness of the State Water Project about 22% by 2070, and seismic events could further affect the reliability of the State Water Project. So the Delta Conveyance Project benefit cost analysis monetized the benefits and the costs of the project. So on the benefits, we looked at water supply reliability and water quality, as well as seismic reliability. For project costs, I took the cost estimate that Graham just provided for the construction cost, and then added in O&M costs, as well as the monetization of some of the remaining significant environmental impacts. So with that cost and benefit comparison, the benefit cost ratio was 2.2, which means for every dollar spent, there would be $2.2 gained, which is a pretty healthy benefit cost analysis or benefit cost ratio. So just to highlight this goes back to the points I was talking about earlier in the presentation. Right now, and this is sort of the important piece that really derives the benefits of the project. So right now, under 2020 conditions, we average about 2.5 to 2.6 million acre feet of deliveries through the State Water Project. And with climate change and sea level rise by 2070, we expect that to drop by about 570,000 acre feet. This is a really significant change. This is a very important water supply throughout California, and having these changes from climate change and sea level rise primarily will really affect the long-term stability of this project. So what we're trying to accomplish with the Delta Conveyance Project is restore some of that reliability. Now, we're looking at an increase in supply of about 400,000 acre feet, which doesn't fully address the climate change that we will be facing through 2070, but does a really good job of helping to protect the reliability of the State Water Project long term. So to monetize the water supply benefits, we looked at what they were, and generally more State Water Project deliveries allow agencies to fill storage more frequently, to enter drought periods with higher reserves, so the shortages during drought are less severe. That means fewer periods of mandatory rationing, and it also reduces the severity and frequency of shortages. So for the urban water supply users, the benefits are measured as the consumer's willingness to pay to avoid shortages. And that calculation of willingness to pay was based on peer-reviewed economic models. On the agricultural side, we looked at both the SWAP model, which is the statewide agricultural production model, as well as water market transaction data to describe the benefits to agriculture of having those increased deliveries and reduced shortages. On the water quality side, the Delta Conveyance Project would have water quality benefits to the end user. It would also have some impacts in the Delta. And while those impacts are less than significant in the EIR, they are pretty minor, they are there. And so we wanted to make sure we were monetizing both the water quality benefits and the impacts. The benefits do outweigh the adverse impacts and the costs of those impacts. So on the water quality side, on the urban part of this, reduced salinity helps reduce treatment cost, improve taste, extends the useful life of appliances, and decreases the costs of water softening. For agricultural users, it helps allow more efficient water use because there's less salinity within that water supply, and reduces the use of irrigation water to flush salts out of root zones. Seismic benefits were a pretty important consideration. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but the Delta is a system of fragile levees that we are concerned about how they are affected during an earthquake event. And we, as part of our responsibility within DWR to help with flood protection, we do a lot of work looking at different flood scenarios in the Delta and how we prepare for those flood scenarios. And so we use some of that work to help as the basis for this seismic analysis. So we use the Delta Flood Emergency Management Plan. They have a number of scenarios. So we used a fairly likely scenario of a major earthquake event that causes extended levee breaches and island flooding. So about 50 levee breaches and 20 islands flooded. So what happens when a levee is damaged, the water can rush in from the bay, and that causes salinity intrusion into the Delta. And this is a situation where there's quite a bit of salinity coming into the Delta. So under that scenario one, there would be almost a year full outage of the South Delta pumps, and then over another year of very seriously degraded water quality. So having an alternate means of diversion during that time is really important. The Delta Conveyance Project is far enough upstream that it is not affected under those conditions. So the economic impacts look at how the water supply reliability and water quality improves with the Delta Conveyance Project. But I will say it also factors in the frequency of this event. This is a fairly uncommon event. So while the benefits associated with seismic protection are pretty large, once you factor in the frequency, it's really much smaller than the water supply benefits that we discussed earlier. One other thing to note is that we did a sensitivity analysis looking at different potential future conditions. One of the things that we wanted to consider is how robust are these findings? If climate changes in different ways than what we're anticipating, will it affect the benefits of the project? So we looked at a number of different 2070 conditions. Our main scenario yielded a benefit cost of 2.2. And then we looked at a number of other conditions with more sea level rise, different kinds of actions to address climate change and sea level rise. And generally, all of the 2070 conditions had a benefit cost ratio of well over 2. We also looked just for information at 2040 conditions, and these were modeling runs that we had completed as part of our environmental impact report. So this was information we had. And it was something we wanted to check on, but also in 2040, the project is only barely going to be operational. So we recognize that 2040 climate change isn't really a great measure of the amount of climate change that is likely to occur during the life of the project. But even looking at 2040 conditions, we had benefit cost ratios over 1.5. And just generally, when we're looking at water projects, you need the benefit cost ratio to be over 1 to indicate that it has more benefits than costs, but you usually want it to be a little higher than that to really demonstrate that there's some robustness included. And these sensitivity analyses demonstrate that really, regardless of the hydrologic conditions, we always had a pretty robust benefit cost ratio. We also considered how the Delta Conveyance Project costs compare to other alternate water supplies. And when you look at the levelized cost of the Delta Conveyance Project over time, and this is the net present value, so this is different than how this will be charged to users. This is just the net present value of cost compared to the net present value of the supply costs of other supplies. So this is a way to look at sort of an apples to apples comparison across different projects. So the Delta Conveyance Project levelized net present value would be $13.25 per acre foot. And when you look at the other supplies, that is less than half the cost of desal. It's also on the lower end of recycling and stormwater. It is pretty similar to the average costs of water conservation, but I do want to flag that the other alternate supply costs are derived from recent past projects. And the costs of water conservation, many of the cost-effective conservation measures have already been implemented, so those conservation costs may go up for future projects. So just in closing, I really wanted to talk about the idea that we know that the costs are high of the Delta Conveyance Project. It seems like a large number, but the costs of doing nothing are even higher. If we take no action, the climate change and seismic risk to the State Water Project is tremendous. We face a 22% reduction in deliveries by 2070. And the direct impacts of that include reduced reliability and flexibility for State Water Project operations. We expect more water shortages and mandatory restrictions. There is a continued risk of this major seismic disruption that we would not be prepared for, that, as I mentioned, could cause a disruption of over a year to the existing Delta facilities, and the need for expensive alternate supplies. There are also indirect effects that we didn't capture in our analysis. Higher rates for local agencies, the impacts on employment and economic activity within the Central Valley in Southern California, higher food prices, and depletion of groundwater resources. And one note, I mentioned earlier that this year we would have been able to capture about 941,000 acre feet. That kind of impact isn't captured in our benefit cost analysis either, because it was an outlier. As I mentioned, steelhead congregating near the South Delta pumps is an unusual condition. However, unusual conditions happen often. You know, it may not be steelhead near the South pumps, but it may be something else. And that benefit of flexibility is something that we know is serious and there, but isn't captured in the benefit cost analysis. So just to close, we know that if there is no action, that cost is greater than the $38 billion that we've identified in project benefits. So with that, we are at the end of our presentation. It sounds like there is another presentation coming, but we're happy to answer questions now or later if there is time available.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, you want to continue?
Yes. I guess at this time, does the board have any questions for Carrie or Graham regarding the presentation that they provided? No? Okay. All right. On my end, I have a PDF. It was a PowerPoint, but I think it's PDF slides. Some of it is repetitive. So I'll go through this fairly quickly. And what I would like to do is just kind of walk the board through what we're proposing as far as actions. Then I would like to walk through some previous board actions and show who DCP participants are. And benefits, Carrie did an excellent job talking about that, so I'll breeze through those. And Graham went through the schedule, so I really don't need to talk about that. And then I'll end with just our recommendation again. So at this time, what we're proposing to the board is authorize the providing of additional funding to the Department of Water Resources for the Desert Water Agency's share of the pre-construction cost associated with the DCP project, and also considering the Department of Water Resources previous certified EIR to adopt CEQA responsible agency findings, CEQA findings of fact, and CEQA statement of overriding considerations. And this slide, this just kind of shows the history of some actions that have been taking place over the previous years. And you see back in October of 2017, DWA's board authorized supporting the Cal Water Fix, which was the 2-tunnel project. And then I'd like to show, and in 2019 is when Governor Newsom announced that he did not support the water fix, but did support the single tunnel, which turned into the DCP project. And then the other item here on December 2023 is Department of Water Resources certifies the EIR and approves the project. So, and the final EIR identifies the state water contractor member agencies as responsible agencies for actions related to the DCP.
Steve, I have a question.
Yes.
When DWA got involved in 2017 and the board voted for it, did we put out any money at that point?
At that time, Resolution 1172 stated that we supported, and then in I believe the first money agreement was, let's see here, that would have been for the DCP was in 2020. So I don't believe for California Water Fix at that time we had placed any money towards the California, we just supported the project. However, Finance Director Sines, are you familiar with previous funding for the California Water Fix?
I am not familiar with the previous funding for the California Water Fix, but it's something I can take a look into.
So that leads to a second question that's a little bit maybe further, maybe you'll address it. How much money has DWA invested in this thus far?
Well, in 2020, we invested $1.9 million, and then in March of 2022, we authorized $3.28 million. That's for the DCP.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Steve, could I interject?
Yep. Go ahead, Mike.
My recollection is that the agency did advance some money for the California Water Fix project because there was some money left over, and the board subsequently had to authorize that leftover money to be allocated instead for the Delta Conveyance project. So I think money was originally advanced as well for the California Water Fix project.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And we can get that information for you, Director Bowman, if you like. Okay. I'd like to go to the slide with the participating public water agencies, which is this slide here just is a listing of the public water agencies who are participating in DCP. The agencies in the green color have gone through this that process that we're doing today and have authorized the additional funding. As you can see, Desert Water Agency, we're yellow, so we haven't gone to the green part yet, but hopefully today will go green. There's still some large agencies that have not gone through this process, Kern and Metropolitan. So I believe Met will be taking this to their board in December. And the next slide just is a slide that shows the trends of the state water project allocation. As you can see, it's heading down. By 2043, it'll be somewhere between 41 and 45% reliability. And I'd like to go to the next slide, please. Again, this is something like Carrie went over, but the objectives, of course, are climate resiliency, seismic resiliency, water supply reliability, and operational resiliency. And the next slide, the next two slides just show how during water conditions, the orange indicates how much DCP will be able to collect through the tunnel. There's 2040 and then 2070. And the next slide, Graham went through this, so I'll skip that. And then this slide here, just wanted to highlight some milestones.
Excuse me for a
Yes,
moment. Could we
yes.
make the slide bigger? Because there's part of it that's sort of chopped off at the right side. Can we? Thank you.
There we go. Okay. So currently we are at the board action right now, pre-construction funding for 2026, 2027. The other item I just would like to show is that there's potential board action for 2028, and that potentially would be for another $265 million. And then sometime after 2029, long-term financing is the plan. So currently, how did we get to $4.56 million? We just took our share percentage, 1.52, and multiplied it by the $300 million, and that is how we got to $4.56 million that we are asking for funding. And with that, I'd just like to state that staff is recommending that the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 1340 as a responsible agency under CEQA, confirming the adequacy of the EIR for the proposed Delta Conveyance Project, making certain findings under CEQA, and adopting the Statement of Overriding Considerations for the EIR, and also authorizing additional funding for the next phase of pre-construction work for the DCP in the amount of up to $4.56 million. Director Sines has reviewed this report, and this report has also been reviewed by legal counsel. And with that, I'd like to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, just a comment. I've attended at least a dozen meetings on the subject over the last year or two, probably more than 24 meetings. The last job I did before I retired worked on the San Vicente Tunnel in San Diego. So I have some familiarity with this kind of work, and throughout all of those meetings, I kept waiting for somebody with actual experience on a project like this. And a few weeks ago, I think it was either the DCA or the water contractors had a group of actual contractors that have participated in construction projects on this level. And it was a relief to hear them kind of sign off
on the practicality of this and what we're entering into. So when I look back on this agency's history, the reason it exists is to participate in this project and these projects in terms of our responsibility to bring water into the valley. So I just want to thank everybody for their patience and allowing me to attend all those meetings and get a real idea about what we're doing here. And I'm in full support of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
I have one question will this money come out of our general fund reserves?
So this money will come out of we do have money set aside in our general fund reserves. There is no anticipated increase into our property tax rate for this project.
Okay. Thank you. I'm also in full support and think this project's very important and get it moving forward. So, and that's it.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. We're currently participating in the State Water Project. What would happen if we didn't do this? How would that affect our current participation in the State Water Project?
Well, our percent of allocation we would not receive that benefit of what the tunnels are anticipating. Somewhere maybe we were between 12 to 15% increase at this time, I believe. So our allocation would continually drop, and you would not see a increase based on those orange slices that I showed on that slide. We would only be able to take the water that would be in that blue portion. We're still a water contractor, so we'd still be able to receive water, it would be less of water.
And have we been able to get our full allocations since we've been in this process with the State Water Project?
It's based on hydrology and so forth. As you can see, I think right now they are at like 50% on average, and we have last year, the year before it was 100% allocation, but on average now it's around 52%.
They said the current cost per acre foot is $1,325. Is that currently what we're paying?
That's for the
Oh, well,
that's for the DCP.
right.
Yes.
I don't know if it was construction, Director Bloomer.
Is Carrie still on?
I am. I was just wondering if you wanted me to jump in. I don't have the information on what Desert is currently paying. I could find it, but it would take me a minute.
Well, on the slide
It
that
is
you
less.
presented.
Yeah. So the slide that I presented is not the same as what Desert would pay as a rate for the water eventually, because what will happen is the construction costs will be funded through bonds, and those bonds would have to be repaid. There would be interest. So there will be other economic things factored in as you're determining the rate. What we were trying to do with that slide, the 1325, is compare it apples to other kinds of supplies. Those are all funded through different mechanisms. And so we wanted to try to bring them all back to the same mechanism at net present value. So that was a way to compare across the slides. It's not a good measure of what you would pay in the future, but it's an indication of the range, but it's not a specific number of what you would pay.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand our history with it and what would happen if we did or didn't participate. Because if we do the amount today, we will have invested close to $10 million in this, if I added up the numbers correctly. And that's just right now. And then we still have, as you said, more payments to go. So I'm concerned that we don't have a direct connect to
the State Water Project. We do the exchange with Met through the aqueducts that flow through our hills. And what would happen if the Colorado River dries up and we can't exchange with Met? And yet we've put out all this money. So those are, to me, legitimate concerns. I'm not saying I'm against the project. I'm asking questions to get a frame of reference. And it does kind of scare me that we're going to be going out another 18 years before startup. I hope I'm alive in 18 years, but I don't know that I will be.
I think you will.
And I think it's interesting that in 1933, the Colorado Aqueduct was started and it was finished in 1941. I realize we have a whole lot of different world right now, but that it's taking so long. And that's what can you say? But it was just something that I'm pondering. So our payment or our amount is due to how much we are participating in with the project.
That's correct.
Okay. Let me see if I had any other little questions. Have we asked that question? What if the Colorado River dries up and we can't exchange? And we don't have a direct connect to the State Water Project?
That is correct. We do not have a direct connect to the State Water Project. If the Colorado River dries up, there would be a lot of issues with not just us, but with metropolitan water districts and so forth. That I don't have the answer for you with that.
Yeah, and it's a hypothetical. I don't want it either to dry up. But we're laying out ratepayers' money over the time, and
I mean, the alternative would be is that we build a connection to the State Water Project. If it came to that point, but hopefully the Colorado, it will be a reliable source for us and for many, many years to come. And they're working on ensuring that reliability on the river too. So I know there's a lot of discussion on that.
And then maybe this would be for the or the DCP people. How much of this water is going to agriculture and how much to urban?
So at this point, we're still working on the various participation of different agencies. I think that overall there are fewer agricultural participants than urban participants, but the main agricultural participant is Kern County Water Agency and also Dudley Ridge Water Agency. Kern has some urban, but it also has some ag, and those two together are about 13% of the project funding. So some rough numbers currently. Things may change as we move forward, but that's the current process.
Okay. Thank you. You've answered all my questions.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we go back to the slide in your presentation, Mr. Johnson, that had the list of the participants?
Yeah. Right there. Yeah. Thank you.
So I'm trying to understand the difference between Table A percent and DCP planning funding percent. And really the one that stands out dramatically is Kern County Water Agency. I'm trying to understand why their Table A is at 26, but their funding is at 11.
So they have members who are not participating in the DCP. And so you'll see Table A is their full participation of members. The 11.22% is their participation of the percentage of the members who are participating in the DCP. Not all state water contractors are participating in the DCP at this time.
Right, I understand that. It just seems like such a differential, which of course is then being picked up to incrementally by all the other agencies that are participating.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions or comments, we can move to taking an action. I'll look for a motion.
If you could bring up the agenda item, I'll read the motion from the agenda. Otherwise, I'll move the recommended action on,
Would you like to read it, or would you just?
well, I'm looking for it. She's
Yeah.
scrolling for it here. Just go up to the agenda and I'll read the agenda.
Could you go to the top of this agenda item? Yeah.
Oh, well, I could have done. Okay, sorry. There you go. I move staff recommendation that as a responsible agency under CEQA, confirming the adequacy of the EIR for the proposed Delta conveyance project, making certain findings under CEQA, and adopting the statement of overriding considerations for the EIR. And number 2, authorize additional funding for the next phase of pre-construction work for the Delta conveyance project in the amount of $4,560,000.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Gracia and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Our next action item, 7B, request authorization to file a CEQA notice of exemption for the AMI fixed network project. Ms. Rapola, thank you.
Good morning, President Ortega, members of the board. Staff is requesting board authorization to file a CEQA notice of exemption for our advanced metering infrastructure or AMI project.
There we go. How's that better? Okay. In June of 2023, the California Department of Water Resources awarded the Coachella Valley IRWM region over $2 million in grant funding for our regional meter replacement project. So this $2 million was in addition to the $6 million we already received through the Urban Community Drought Relief Grant Program. So all told, $8 million in funding through this program that we received as a region. The Regional Meter Replacement Program has 2 participants or 2 agencies. So us and then India Water Authority would be the other agency that is participating in this project. To satisfy the California Environmental Quality Act requirements for grant funding, Desert Water is planning to file a CEQA notice of exemption for our AMI fixed network component of this project. The AMI fixed network project includes construction of up to 27 antennas, any electrical facilities that are needed to allow for radio signal reads, any SCADA equipment, and any solar equipment necessary at existing agency sites. So when we say existing sites, these are already developed sites. We're talking about well sites, reservoir sites, booster sites. This project does not have the potential to result in significant effect on the environment, and it does qualify for CEQA exemption under categorical exemption classes 1 for existing facilities and class 3 for new construction or conversion of small structures. And with board authorization granted today, staff will file the notice of exemption in Riverside County and with the Office of Planning and Research State Clearinghouse. Filing of this NOE would begin the 35-day statute of limitations for legal challenges on the agency's acceptance of this project under CEQA. At the conclusion of that 35-day period, staff would prepare and submit a legal challenges letter to the Department of Water Resources per the requirements under our grant agreement. There is no additional fiscal impact to filing the notice of exemption for this project. I would note that there is funding under fiscal year 23-24 budget for this project to the tune of, I believe, about $1.2 million. I would also note that our portion of that $2 million grant is $375,000. So that is the state funding that we're receiving. In addition to that, we have also been awarded $500,000 in federal funding through the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart Grant Program. Director Science did review this report. No legal review this time around. And staff is recommending that the board authorize filing of this notice of exemption in Riverside County and with the Office of Planning and Research State Clearinghouse for the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Fixed Network Project. Your two attachments do include a draft copy of this CEQA notice of exemption along with a phased project map. And at this time, I would welcome any questions that the board has.
Thank you. Director Grasha, questions?
No questions. I just want to restate my objection to the whole idea, although I will vote for it. But I hope to live to be here and say, see, I told you the batteries are dead and now we got another problem. So with that.
Okay. Director Bloomer.
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
Okay. And I have none. So we'll look for a motion.
Move the staff recommendation.
Okay. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Grasha and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Items 7C is request acceptance of work for 2021-2022 pipeline replacement project. Mr. Mulhook.
Good morning, President Ortega, members of the board. I would like to request board acceptance of the 2021-2022 pipeline replacement project. The 2020-21 capital improvement budget, capital project 211011 for installation of replacement pipelines in 6 areas that you can see on your attachments 1 and 2. The budget for the project was $5,715,000, including engineering, overheads, construction, and inspection of approximately 16,000 lineal feet of 8-inch ductile iron and just over 600 feet of 12-inch ductile iron pipe. These new ductile iron pipes replaced leaking and failing unlined steel pipe, as much of our replacement projects have been doing for pipe installed in the 50s and 60s. At the December 19th, 2023 board meeting, the board awarded the contract to Board & Excavating. Board & Excavating has completed all the work associated with the contract, and the contract amount and change orders are summarized as follows. The original contract was just under $4.1 million. The first change order, just over $200,000, was for an additional 650 feet of ductile iron pipe that we were able to install on Compadre Road that we added to the project. Change order number 2, and right around $28,000, was for additional work the contractor had to perform due to unmarked facilities, other utilities in the roadway. And then the last change order 3 for $6,000, was work that we didn't need to do due to monument tie-outs. So the final contract amount is $4,343,734,000. After board acceptance, a notice of completion will be filed, and after the lien period, the agency will release retained funds in the amount of $217,186.70. To date, $4,472,845.94 has been extended for all expenses on capital project 211011. After retention is released, it is estimated that the project will be completed $951,000 under budget. Per a staff report during September 17th, 24 board meeting regarding the request for board authorization to award contract for constructing the 2024 winter pipeline replacement projects, some of the remaining funds from this project will be transferred to capital project 221063 to fill that funding gap. Legal review was not applicable. Fiscal impact, the total budget originally was $5,715,000. The original contract was $4,099,247,000. Three change orders that totaled $244,487. And the total contract costs of $4,343,734. Expenditures for the project will be $4,763,963, and $600,000 in excess funds will be transferred to capital project 221063. Finance Director Sines has reviewed this report. And so the staff recommends the board accept the work for constructing the 2021 pipeline replacement project in the amount of $4,343,734 and authorize the transfer of excess funds of $600,000 from capital project 211011 to capital project 221063. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions?
Just one. Could you estimate about how long each residence would have been offline during their changeover from the new to the, from the old to the new? I mean, just long enough to make the switch at the meter, I guess, or?
Yes, that is correct, Director Grasha. Depending on the connections in the neighborhood, sometimes we might have more than one shutdown, but typically the shutdown only happens when they're moving the home side piping to the new service from the old service. And generally that takes an hour or less at each residence.
It's excellent work when you can pull that off for a couple of hundred houses. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions.
Okay. Vice President Bowman?
None from
No?
me.
All right, I have none, so I'll look for a motion.
I move staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Thanks. So we have a first from Director Grasha, a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next is 7D, request authorization for contract award, Mission Creek Groundwater Recharge Facility Maintenance Project. Welcome back.
Good morning again, President Ortega and members of the board. I'm requesting recommendation of contract award for Mission Creek Groundwater Recharge Facility Maintenance Project. The 24-25 general fund budget includes operating expenses for maintenance of the Mission Creek Groundwater Recharge Facility. The project will involve the removal of vegetation, clearing of large rocks, and preparation of basin bottoms to enhance water infiltration rates across all 12 basins. This will support the replenishment of the Mission Creek subbasin. Since its construction in 2002, the recharge facility basins 1 and 7, the uppermost basins, have undergone significant maintenance. The most recent work completed was in August of 21, resulting in improved filtration rates. This project aims to replicate those successful outcomes by extending similar maintenance to the remaining basins. By cleaning large rocks, removing accumulated vegetation, and breaking up compacted basin bottoms, this will restore optimal infiltration rates and enhance overall performance of the facility. On November 6th, 2024, Desert Water Agency received 3 bid proposals for this project. Those bids you can see in attachment number 2. TriStar Contracting and Weaver Grading and Van Dyke Corporation all submitted bids. TriStar Contracting Inc. submitted the lowest responsive bid, approximately 30% lower than second lowest bid. TriStar Contracting Inc. is regarded as a capable contractor with a current Class A contractor's license. The primary difference in the cost proposals was varying cost for the removal and disposal of vegetative waste. The project is scheduled to begin no later than January 6th of 25, with an anticipated completion date of 81 calendar days. This is to ensure that the work is completed before we receive deliveries again next spring. Legal review will be performed at the time of the contract negotiation, and fiscal impact, the 24-25 general fund budget allocated $500,000 for the maintenance. TriStar Contracting Inc.'s bid of $335,423.30 is $164,576.70 below the budgeted amount. The total estimated project cost, including all associated expenses, is anticipated to remain $100,000 below the allocated budget. Finance Director Sands has reviewed this report. And with that, staff recommends the board award the contract for the Mission Creek Groundwater Recharge Maintenance Project to TriStar Contracting Inc. in the amount of $335,423.30. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Grusha, do you have any questions on this?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
None for me.
Okay.
None from me.
Okay. I have one question. TriStar is a vendor that we've worked with before.
Yes, sir.
And have they done this kind of work before for us?
Yes, they are actually one of many contractors on our pre-approved grading contractor list. So this is work that they have sections of their company that do on a regular basis.
Okay. Thank you. I have no other questions. So
I move staff recommendation.
thank you. Look for a second.
I'll second.
All right. I have a first from Vice President Bowman and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we can move to item 8, which is a discussion item. A discussion of DWA legislative and policy platform for 2025-2026. Ms. York, thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, President Ortega and members of the board. So today's discussion item is going to help me write and craft our new legislative and policy platform for the upcoming 119th Congress, which starts January 2025, as well as the next state legislative session, also starting early January 2025. So the Congress and state legislative session operate on a 2-year cycle, and so the platform would be valid for 2 years, and we could, of course, amend to it and add or remove anything that we may need to. And so with that being said, I think we can go straight to the presentation, and then if there are questions throughout, please feel free to ask it so that we can make this more of a dialogue, and then it helps me understand the direction and the thoughts of the board. So the presentation is attachment 2. Did you want to zoom out more so we could get the full screen of the presentation? Zoom out. Yeah, so we can see that. There we go, whole slide. Great. So what we're going to do is go through our, we're not going to go through our current one. I have compiled a list of directives, which include our current directives, and there are some revised directives. There's also new directives. And the directives are going to help us to determine general operations, state and federal priorities. And the importance of a legislative and policy platform is that it's a board-approved document, which will be coming back to you the second meeting of December.
And it will really help to guide me and guide our state and federal advocates, because this will be a board-approved documents of what our policy and our priorities are. So it gives us as staff the, not necessarily the freedom, but the ability to move quickly should the legislature or Congress do something that we need to act on quickly, and we already know kind of what the board priorities are. Next slide. So and this is just going to be the draft directives, and the final document, as mentioned, will come back to you the second meeting of December, and it will be a full-on document with paragraphs and that will explain each directive further. This is just to identify the directives. So Directive 1, maintain local control of water resources and avoid constraints on operations. Directive 2, maintain or improve Desert Water Agency's ability to efficiently conduct business. And Directive 3, protect Desert Water Agency's local and imported water supply. So those don't differ from what we currently have. Those are currently existing directives. Okay. Directive 4 and 5 are new and relate to the Colorado River. So support investments for Colorado River water quality and salinity reduction. And Directive 5, support the Lower Basin proposal for the post-2026 operating guidelines for the Colorado River Basin, or Colorado River. And these are currently part of our federal priorities that we have been discussing nonetheless for the last year, and I imagine also before my time here at the agency. So it's just a matter of codifying them, for lack of a better word, in our platform. Okay, Directive 6 and 7 are a mix of new and old. So 6 is to support federal legislation to exempt conservation rebates issued by water districts from tax burdens. And so that's something that we've talked about previously and is something we're very active on currently. And Directive 7 would be support liability protections for water and wastewater agencies following the designation of PFAS as a hazardous substance under CERCLA. And so this would provide, this one's new, so this past April, PFAS was designated as a hazardous substance by CERCLA. And so what this directive would allow us the ability to sign on to various letters for protections with for passive receivers. So even though we are not the ones that are putting PFAS into certain things, this would allow us to seek protection, because the whole point of CERCLA is that whoever the responsible party is the one that should be penalized, not us as a result. And so we should be, as staff's opinion, supportive of seeking those exemptions. Directives 8 and 9 are to support federal and state avenues for conservation program funding, such as the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart program. And additionally, Directive 9, keep water and tax rates affordable, and when possible, seek external funding for planning, new projects, conservation, and/or facility improvements. Directive 10 is also new, to support investments to enhance California's water infrastructure for conveyance, storage capacity, flexibility, and reliability, including the Delta Conveyance Project, Sites Reservoir, and the State Water Project. This one's a general, if there's any bills within the state legislature that can affect water infrastructure as a whole, it's something we want to be able to act on quickly and be supportive of. Directive 11 would be to oppose a state water tax or fee and monitor ways in which the state will address water affordability. So this can also play into rate assistance programs, and of course, if there is movement, again, as we saw a few years ago, towards a water tax. Directive 12 is also new. Continue to engage with and advocate for the State Water Resources Control Board to implement the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulation in a way that avoids unnecessary costs for water agencies and takes into account Desert Water Agency's local conditions. So those are the 12 directives that I recommend we include in our legislative and policy platform. It does increase it from our previous platform, which had 7, but in working with our state and federal advocates, this does provide more of an umbrella for us to act quickly as needed. So with that, I do welcome any discussion, questions, or feedback that you may have.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions?
Well, I just a comment on the one in terms of supporting agencies that are completely irresponsible, and us standing beside them and protecting them from litigation seems to me to be beneath us as an agency. We have a pumper that straight up says drinking certain amounts of poison is good for you. And to think that we would somehow fight to protect their right to continue, it's a stretch too far for me.
I don't think that's what Director Yort was suggesting. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think you're referring to the directive regarding PFAS.
Well, in this case, it's chromium-6, but
Okay. Well, we don't have any, I'm not suggesting anything in the platform related to chromium-6.
okay.
What I'm referring to is the federal designation. So this is federal, not state, of PFAS and protection for passive receivers as ourselves, right? Because if it's a precautionary measure because the regulatory conditions are still unclear of how the federal government will be handling passive receivers.
Okay.
And their liability within that. So we want that protection for ourselves.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Do you have any other questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No questions. Thanks.
Vice President Bowman.
Thank you for finding other items that we need to focus on, and I think you're going to have your hands full with 12 now. I particularly liked 6, 7, and 12. I liked them all, but I particularly liked it.
I'll make sure to star those. No.
Oh, no. I'm just saying, good job.
Right.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So my question, I have several. So we've increased the total number. Were any removed?
None.
None were removed. So was there consultation with our state and federal, and what was I'm curious to know where they came in on in terms of like what they felt. Are those the 5 new ones basically?
So.
Or maybe it was just a refinement of some of the ones that we already had.
So I did consult with both our state and federal team, and they were content and pleased actually with the current platform. I think it's as we've been having conversations over the past year where we have included other items within our own talking points and just making sure that we now have included that within a board-approved document versus, I think we talked about this, I'm sure the board's supportive, and so it's kind of codifying that support or opposed sentiment. But, the Colorado River piece, even though we don't have, a direct tie to the Colorado or rights to the Colorado, whatever happens on the Colorado per our discussion earlier with the DCP item is still of great import for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think having that in a document that will live in the public domain and something that we can share with our legislative offices as well is important for them to see where our positions are as an agency. And so it was really, I felt some items were lacking and added those moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Do you feel like you have some feedback from us?
Yeah. Is there anything on here that is missing in the board's opinion that you would like to see included? Doesn't seem like there's anything you want removed, but is there anything that wasn't covered that may be of interest?
Anyone?
Only that with a change in administration, perhaps there's going to be some policy changes on the river, for instance. Certainly in the Central Valley, that will likely affect us. I don't know if this document gives you the ability to, weigh in on those potential changes as they come about, but I think it's going to happen fast and with quite vigor over the next 90 days. It's going to be a very educational time for all of us. So look forward to it.
Certainly. So each directive will have, it'll be fleshed out more, and it'll explain each directive in more detail. And I think that's where you're going to see where and how we should be interacting. So these are just your main kind of outline, but definitely taking that into consideration as we've talked about the Conservation Rebate Tax Parity Act. There are some Trump tax rules from his previous administration that are expiring next year. And so we expect there to be a new tax vehicle, which really is exciting for this because we think that there may finally be an opportunity for that tax parity amongst other utilities to come forward. So I think that's a great comment. And yes, there will be a period of change, certainly, and we need to be able to adapt quickly.
I read an article in, I think it was Cal something, and they talked about actual day one presidential orders coming down in regard to our interests here. So, and I don't know what that effect that'll have on us, or if any at all, but it's fascinating to hear everybody's kind of comments on that subject. It's going to be an interesting few months.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from us?
No, that's everything.
All
I
right.
appreciate the feedback. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. All right, we can move to item 9, which is the general manager's report.
Thank you, President Ortega. First item is just some news regarding State Water Project. On November 4th, Department of Fish and Wildlife issued a new ITP, or incidental take permit, for the long-term operation of the State Water Project. And this is something that DWR has been working with the Bureau of Reclamation since 2021, along with the state and federal fish agencies. There's a quote here from Jennifer Pierre, who's the State Water Contractor General Managers, just stating that it appears that the new ITP resolves some issues raised in 2020. And with that, for Thanksgiving holiday, DWA's offices will be closed on Thursday, November 28th and Friday, November 29th. So happy Turkey Day. And then a day to recover after eating all the turkey. System leak data. 32 leaks. We have Calais Roca and Calais-Chia is number 1 on the list here as far as number of leaks, and that along with Indian Trail and Vista Oro are planned to be replaced in summer of 2026, and the Ramon Road section is scheduled for summer of 2025, and the Lugo Drive is currently on an awarded pipeline, so that should be replaced shortly. And then the following list here, I added this just to add some more substance to this report. It shows the streets, the number of leaks, and then the labor hours that it that was involved with those repairs. And as you see, there was a total of 330.5 labor hours. In labor hours, if there's a crew of 5, let's say, that worked 1 hour on a leak, that would be 5 hours of labor hours. That's how you get the total. I will highlight there is one street here where there was 50 labor hours, Via del Norte. That had multiple crews on site. There were some issues with shutting down the main to make those repairs. And they also had some issues with the repair work on that, requiring a lot of employees on site, and totaled, as I said, 50 hours. But hopefully that's some beneficial information for the directors, and if you'd like to see more information, just let me know. We have our human resource meetings and activities. And Ms. Hopping is not here today, but from looking at her list, a lot of Tyler implementation meetings. We had open enrollment meetings for our benefits, and she hosted a benefits fair for employees here on October 30th. And there was a couple of strategic planning meetings that she attended. As far as the general manager's meetings and activities, as you see, tribal mediation dominated a lot of the days, but also had an executive committee meeting on the 14th and a strategic plan update meeting on the 14th. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have any questions for our general manager?
No questions, no comments. Thank you for the.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
No questions.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman?
None from me.
Okay. And just, could we go back to the leak report with the colored bands?
Yes.
So I just want to point out that those that are in the light blue are all in my neighborhood. And I'm sure the construction folks will be happy when this project is done and they don't have to hear from me on a regular basis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
That's all.
Okay.
So we can move now to director's reports on meetings and events attended on behalf of the agency. And we'll start with Director Gracia.
Thank you. I have a few. On November 6th, I attended the State Water Project Audit and Finance Committee meeting. On November 7th, the Desert Valley Builders Association legislative meeting, and updated the attendees on our conservation as a California way of life and the effects it will have on Desert Water Agency and our customers. And also on the 7th, Aqua virtual conversation with Pablo Garza, who is the chief consultant for the Assembly Committee on Water, Parks, and Wildlife. And he had a lot of interesting comments about legislation currently under consideration and coming up. On the 9th, I attended the Fields of Valor Memorial in Cathedral City, and I must say, if anybody ever has the opportunity to try to make it over there, it was very touching. Recognizing those service members from the Valley, Palm Springs and Cathedral City specifically, that gave their lives throughout military actions in our America's history, including World War II, of course. On the 12th, I attended the Coachella Valley Water District Board meeting. On the 14th, Desert Water Agency cyber training security meeting, or training. And on the 18th, yesterday, an aqua event that was sponsored by the California Resources Agency. It was an all-day event. It was now available on YouTube. I highly recommend it for anybody that has the time. It featured Governor Jerry Brown with some remarks, also Secretary Wade Crowfoot, and virtually everybody that had their fingerprints at all on sustainability, the Road to Sustainability Sigma 10-year anniversary. So that's the law that we are operating under, and it filled in a lot of blanks that, coming into the game well after it had been adopted, and, we're now participating in it, but that laid out a lot of the background on how it happened. Governor Brown made the comment that he said if it wasn't for stupid legislators, we would have never gotten this passed. He actually said that. So it was a very eye-opening afternoon. So, and that's it.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
Okay, November 6, 7, and 8, I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico for the NWRA annual conference, which started with the leadership forum and going over the priorities of NWRA. And it was all very interesting because it was happening the day after the election, so there was a lot of speculation of what was going to happen. And so attended that. And then we had a meeting with the Bureau of Reclamation where we shared our top priorities. So that was a really good meeting on Thursday morning. And then on Friday morning, we attended the municipal water caucus and saved it from being eliminated from NWRA. So we showed up and said we would participate and help. So that should be good. It's all municipal water agencies that are in that caucus. And I think that is pretty much it. Like I said, we were there the day after the election, so a lot of it was speculation of what's going to be happening in the priorities of the new administration. And that's it on that. And then on November 8th, also we had a mediation meeting. On November 14th, this was non-compensable, but I attended the COD groundbreaking, and President Ortega was there also, so that was good to see that project finally moving forward. And then we also had a mediation Zoom meeting, and then on November 18th, yesterday, we had another mediation meeting. And that was it since our last board meeting.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yeah, well, yeah, there it is. On the 8th, I attended our principals tribal meeting. On the 14th, executive committee, and in the afternoon, followed that by a Zoom for our mediation. And then yesterday, the 18th, the principals tribal. A lot of tribal stuff.
Okay. All right. And for me, as a couple of things have already been mentioned, the NWRA conference in Albuquerque from the 6th to the 8th. Not only was it the day after the election, it also snowed that day, which it was quite cold for the rest of our time there. And I think, as Director Bloomer has mentioned, there was a lot of talk and speculation just as immediately after the election results about what might be happening. I think that's going to become clearer as we move into January, once the new administration's in place, and some of the key players for agencies that will impact us directly and indirectly have been named or are up for confirmation. There was quite a bit of as part of this snow event. Some of the presentations that we we were on the schedule that had to do with New Mexico content, given that the state capital is in Santa Fe, which is an hour drive away, and was kind of difficult to get to Albuquerque. Several of those events happened or were partially virtual with the attendees. Although the information was still quite interesting and informative, it was also a little challenging sometimes to actually hear what people were saying. But that we made do with how we could. And one thing that I thought was very interesting as well, there was the panel that, and this kind of goes back to the election a little bit, was called Inside Washington. And there were two gentlemen, one who had been at NWRA 50 years ago, and another fellow who had been there 49 years ago. They're both attorneys at the same firm in DC, and they had sort of thoughts on. Well, one took it from a very historical perspective and looked at the sort of the history of political upheaval and discourse within this country over the last 250 years, and that was quite informative. But again, quite speculative as well. And then, as Director Bloomer mentioned, on the 14th of this month, last week, there was the groundbreaking for the West Valley campus of College of the Desert, which after 20 years, some of us are happy to see finally in motion, non-compensable event. And then on Saturday, I attended the what used to be called the Coachella Valley Garden Day, is now known as the Native Plant Celebration, put on by Desert Horticultural Society, which is one of the organizations that this agency sponsors and has sponsored since its initial event back in 2006. And that was out at the Desert Wildlife Center, which is opening next year. It was a little windy, a little dusty, but very large attendance, which was nice to see. There were about 350 people that came. And we participated, the agency participated directly via the CV Water Counts booth, where we had a couple of our staff people, as well as staff from other agencies, and also Mr. Elliott, who did a presentation on water conservation. And that's all I have for meetings in the last couple of weeks. And with that, we can move on to our next item, which would be 11, Director's Comments and Requests. Director Grasha.
I have no comments or requests.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Bloomer.
Oh, I did forget to mention that Desert Water Agency was a sponsor of the Palm Springs Hospitality Association first annual pickleball tournament fundraiser. And I was there, I played, I lost, but it was fun. And we were handing out Desert Water Agency water and lip balm, so.
All right. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, I have something here I'd like to read. As Thanksgiving approaches, it's time to reflect on the many things to be grateful for in our lives. We often think of being grateful for the many people in our lives, our families, our friendships, a warm home, plentiful food on a dinner table, and leading a fulfilling life. Sometimes overlooked in our society, however, is our ample access to clean, fresh, drinkable water available straight from our taps whenever we desire. So as you reflect on the things you're grateful for this Thanksgiving, don't omit your and our access to clean water. Water is essential to life, and everyone should have the right to clean water. So we give praise and thanks for the gift of water. May we use it wisely, learn from it humility, consume it sparingly, and protect it vigilantly. To be good stewards of this precious resource is our mission, which I know we're all on the same table on that one, so that we can enjoy it in our lifetime and many generations to come. And I wish all a happy Thanksgiving next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I have nothing else to add at this point. So we will be going into closed session shortly. It's 5 minutes of 10. I'd like to meet in the boardroom at 5 minutes after 10. Thank you to staff and the public who participated today, and also wishing you all a happy Thanksgiving. So I can report that we had no reportable actions in closed session. And with that, we can close today's meeting. Thank you.